Thanks for tuning in. I'm Donnie. I recently picked up this used rear wheel from my YZ250FX to use as a backup. I got a great deal on it, but it was silver, so I sent the rim to be powder coated black, and I got the hub cerakoted dark gray. Today I'm going to lace and true the wheel, and I'll share some of the techniques that I use. Before taking anything apart, I take lots of pictures and video in some cases. I'll point out a couple of things I note on the bike here since this wheel is identical to the one I'm lacing today. I'll take note of the spoke pattern. I take note of which side that there's any writing or etching on the rim and which side that goes. In this case, this goes on the sprocket side, and that's pretty typical. So I also take note of whether or not any threads are showing above the spoke nipples. In this case, these are two outer spokes, and both of these have about 2 threads showing. And then the 2 inner spokes here have about 3 to 4 threads showing for each one. And that seems pretty consistent all the way around the rim. And that's going to help me a lot when I start putting the rim back together and truing it up. Sometimes all the spokes are the same, but you can have as many as 4 different types of spokes on a wheel. When breaking down wheels, I always keep 4 separate groups of spokes, at least until I confirm whether or not they're different. But I typically just label bags and keep them all separate. Here I've got the spokes from my brake disc side, inner spokes, sprocket side, inner spokes, sprocket side, outer spokes, and my brake disc side, outer spokes. So in this case, I've got inner and outer spokes for the sprocket side. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a slight variation in the angle at the top of the spokes. So it's important to keep these separated. So if you look at the hub, you've got 4 different sets of spokes basically. You've got the outer spokes on the sprocket side, the inner spokes on the sprocket side, and then the inner spokes on the brake disc side and the outer spokes on the brake disc side. If you look at the hub from this angle, you can see the inner spokes form a ring here and the outer spokes form a ring here. Before I start putting the spokes in, I put some anti-seize on them, and I like the stick kind because it's a lot less messy than the kind in the squeeze tube. I'll put a link in the video description, just don't mistake it for your chapstick. So as I mentioned before, I'll start with the inner spokes, put all those into the hub. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the outer spokes. Now the outer spokes are going to go the opposite direction, and they'll lay on top of those inner spokes. Alright, this is the sprocket side of my hub, and the writing on my rim is on this side. So before I start attaching any spokes, I want to make sure I've got that oriented correctly. So on the rim, half of the holes are pointed upward toward this side of the hub, and half of the holes are pointed downward toward the other side of the hub. Obviously these spokes are going to go in the upward facing holes. You have holes facing up and down. You also have holes facing left and right. And so those correspond with the spoke and which way the direction the spoke is going. The wheel will basically tell you where each spoke goes. So I'm just going to start with the outer spokes and loosely get the spoke nipples threaded on for each one. Now I've got all the outer spokes started, I can start doing the inner spokes. Alright, I got all the spokes on the sprocket side started, so I'm going to flip it over and do the other side. Alright, so I got all my outer ones loosely connected. Now I'll do the inner ones. Alright, so all the spokes are laced and completely attached now. You can see that it's all very loose. And now I'm going to put it on the truing stand and continue work from there. So you don't absolutely have to have a truing stand to do this. You could at this point mount the hub on the bike and use the swing arm, or if you're working with the front wheel, you can use the front fork to attach some type of pointer or something so that you can true the wheel up. So you could do it on the bike. It's a lot easier if you've got a truing stand. So at this point, I'm just going to start taking out a lot of the slack, and I'm going to tighten each spoke nipple until there's about maybe 6 or 7 threads showing. So I still got a lot of slack in here, so I'm going to start tightening all the spokes evenly and just continue to go around until I gradually start to put tension on all the spokes. So I'm going to use this hole kind of as a reference point. I'm just going to give all the spokes the same number of turns until things start to snug up. Alright, so I've got most of the slack removed now, but still slightly loose. Before I go any further, I want to kind of check up and down movement and see if the rim is centered up and down on the hub. That's actually looking pretty good. If the rim were moving up and down at this point here, then what you would do is mark the point, the low point, and tighten 6 or 8 spokes along that side. Tighten them maybe a half turn. And then you go to the top on the opposite side and loosen those the same amount until when you spin it, you get no up and down motion. And I like to do that while everything is still kind of loose. All right, now I'm just going to go through a standard spoke tightening process and just gradually tighten these up. I'm going to start at my mark on this spoke. I'll tighten this spoke and I'll skip 2, tighten a third one, skip 2, tighten a third one until I get all the way back around. Alright, now that I've gotten all the way back around this one, I'm going to skip to the next one, do the same thing. Tighten this one, skip 2, tighten the third one, skip 2, tighten the third one, go all the way around. Alright, made it back to here, skip to the next one, go all the way around. So I've got a little bit of tension on each spoke now. Spokes are still pretty loose, but most of the slack is gone at this point. So now I can start truing the wheel. And this is the point where keeping things really even really helps you out. We know that the inner spokes are going to have a couple more threads showing than the outer spokes will. And that's what we're seeing here as we're tightening it up. The inner spokes left and right are generally showing the same number of threads, so we know we've gotten those tightened evenly, and that keeps the rim centered up on the hub where it should be. And the rim needs to be centered on the hub between the spokes and not necessarily between the sides of the hub, because most hubs are not symmetrical. So the rim has to be centered on the hub between the spokes. And keeping this stuff even, making sure that your inner and outer spokes left and right are even, helps keep that thing centered where you don't have to overcomplicate that. So this thing's already looking really true, and really at this point all I need to do is finish tightening the spokes and this will be good. But most of the time you're going to have to correct some side to side movement. So I think I'm going to stop and adjust some of these so that it will have some side to side play, so I can show you how to fix that. Alright, so now I've got a little side to side play in the wheel, and I can see that the wheel is closest to the pointer at this point right here. So what I need to do to fix that is I need to tighten 3 or 4 spokes that go to the right side of the hub. I need to tighten those, and I need to loosen the spokes that go to the left side of the hub. That will allow the rim to move over this way. So that's really close now. I'm going to go through a couple more tightening sequences and then see where I'm at. I'm working with 1 millimeter or less there, and for a dirt bike rim, that is just fine. I'm happy with that. Alright, so I got the backup rear wheel ready to go, And my plan is to find a good used front wheel and do the same thing with that. So I'll have a complete spare wheel set. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.